Daniel Anthony was born in Khartoum, Sudan. He had studied in Comboni College. In 1970, he had emigrated to Australia, where he had continued his studies. Then he had returned to Egypt to be ordained a monk by His Holiness Pope Shenouda III, who had chosen St. Anthony Monastery to let him stay in. In 1980, His Holiness Pope Shenouda III asked him to back to Australia, to serve there as a priest in Sydney City, where he had delivered St. Shenouda the Archimandrite Monastery till 2006. In June 2009, His Holiness Pope Shenouda III had ordained him as an archpriest for St. Shenouda the Archimandrite in Sydney City.
Hello and welcome to a new episode of Meet the Bishop. Today we are blessed to be interviewed His Grace Bishop Daniel, the Bishop and Abbot of St. Shenouda Monastery in Sydney, Australia. Thank you for being with us today.
It's a pleasure.
First, we'd like to know a little bit about your background. Where were you born?
I was born in Khartoum in Sudan at the year 1952.
Wow. And is that where you grew up?
Yes, I grew up to the age of 15, 16 years, yes.
Where did you go to school?
I was brought up in a Catholic school. At the elementary level, I was in a Catholic school. It was called Villa Gilda. It's an Italian Catholic school for elementary. Then intermediate, I went to Comboni College. Comboni College, it's also a Catholic, and it's an Italian school. Comboni, it's a saint in the Latin Church. Like here you have in Egypt Don Bosco. So Don means saint, Bosco is a saint, Don Bosco. So we had Comboni. He's a saint called Comboni. So they used to call the college after his name because he was very active with youth. So they called the college after him. So I was brought up in Comboni College up to nearly what they call it, year 7. And then I emigrated to Australia after that time.
So tell us a little bit about your family and how you grew up. And
Sure. As I said, that my parents are their cousins, and both of them are born in Sudan. But originally, my grandparents are from Egypt. My grandfather from my dad's side is from Suhaj, and from my mother's side, my grandparents are from Ekhmim, Isna, and these areas. And then my grandparents are the one who emigrated to Sudan about 120 years ago. And then my parents were born in Sudan.
Did they move there for any reason or just because?
Good question. My grandparents from my mom's side, they were merchants or traders. They used to trade wool and cotton between Egypt and Sudan, and trading at that time was very good between the two countries. My grandfather from my dad's side, he used to work in the government departments, and actually his eldest son, whom is my uncle, he was an engineer. He used to work in constructing the rails between Egypt and Sudan. So he used to take his parents with him. But originally, the grandparents went there to live in Sudan. At that time, there was not much difference between Egypt and Sudan. It was one place. And they used to move and travel between here and there until they found that life there in Sudan was even better. So they stayed there and they lived there. And of course, they brought the Coptic Church with them in Sudan. So that's why the Coptic Church was established then or since then. So yeah, that's my parents. Then from Sudan, immigrated to Australia, 1969 or late 69, 70, 1970. By the way, I have a sister. She is 1 year younger. Now she's married. She has 3 kids, and she lives in Sydney, Australia.
Is that why you moved to Australia? Why did you originally move to Australia?
Again, that's a good question. My father was working as an accountant, and he had some pressure at work. They didn't give him his rights in promoting him to reach his high level. So he was very upset from that, and he said, this is not fair. And since then he started to think of immigrating to other places. So he thought of immigrating to America first, because at that time we had my uncle. I had an uncle who was living in America before we left to Australia. He was a neurologist. My uncle was a neurologist, or he's still a neurologist. He was living in New Jersey. So my uncle used to ask my father, why are you still staying there in Sudan? Why don't you come to America? And also my father had 2 friends whom immigrated to Australia. And also both of them used to nag to my dad, why you are still living in Sudan? Why don't you come to Australia? So my father didn't know where to go, to America or to Australia. And so anyhow, I remember very well when I was still young then, my parents said, okay, let us bring all the forms from America and bring the forms from Australia, and we're going to offer 1 week fasting, and we'll pray, and then the first one will come. This is the sign from God that this is the place we will go to. So we prayed and we fasted for 1 week, and then about a year later the papers from Australia came. So my mom said, let us pack up and go.
A whole year, so you still
Yeah,
waited a while.
We've been waiting and waiting, and we thought that it has been forgotten already. But a year later the papers came. So my mom said, my dad said, no way we're going to go to Australia. Why don't I've got my brother in America. Mama said, no, sorry, we promised the first one comes, this is a sign from God, so let's go to Australia. My dad said, okay, let's go to Australia. So we packed up, we sold whatever we could sell, and we went to Australia. And it was a blessing for us, really a blessing. I think we left at the right time, and we arrived in Australia at the right time. Australia was beautiful at that time, and still beautiful now, but at that time, which is 40 years ago, it was nice and quiet and a blessed country.
Why do you say that it was the right time to leave? Was there something, I mean...
Well, politically, if you're going to talk about politically, at that time in Sudan, also it was a new era of the President Nimeri. He started to implement the Sharia, Sharia law, and he was very tough on the Christians at that time. So it wasn't a pleasing situation or kind of environment. That's from the side of Sudan. But being in Australia at that time, Australia was very quiet then, and there were lots of chances for finding a job. So my parents didn't find any difficulty in applying for any job. So my dad had a job straight away, no problems, because he had the English language, he had the experience of an accountant. He found a job straight away. Even my mom, she didn't want to work, but she felt very boring, being in a new country, in a new place, staying all day at home alone. So she felt bored, and she started looking for work. So whenever I go and knock for a place, for a job, they tell her, yes, come tomorrow. So straight away she found a job. And when she feel tired, she gave up and resigned, stay at home for a few months. Then when she started to feel bored again, gonna apply a job, she get a job like that. At that time, I remember, if you bring a friend to the job, to the area where you're working, they give you $30 as a bonus.
Oh, wow.
As a bonus.
Just
so
bringing somebody to work.
just to bring, yeah.
Wow.
So this show you how much they were in need of
Right.
people to go or to come to Australia and to work. So it was very peaceful and then, and it was great. At that time I entered high school there. I finished up my study there. Then I studied accountancy. Then I looked for a job. I found a job, easy. I worked for nearly 6 years.
What were the churches like at that time, both in Sudan and Australia? And you can talk about the differences, or what was it like at that time?
In Sudan, the Coptic church was well established then, because being started for a long time. But going to Australia, the Coptic church was just starting, because our first Coptic priest ever to come to Australia and to establish a Coptic church there was at the year 69, January 69, when we had our first Coptic priest. That was late Father Minan Amatallah, and he just passed away 10 years ago. But he was our first Coptic priest to come to Australia. Father Minan Amatallah was the cousin, or not the cousin, sorry, he was the nephew of Baba Krulus. And his mother was Baba Krulus' sister. So when we asked His Holiness Pope Krulus at that time, I'm talking about 69, to ask him to send us a priest, he found that that his nephew is the best one, and he is the best one, really. He was a great man. So he ordained him, and especially for Australia. And he arrived January 69. That was the most happy day for the Coptics in Australia. So he came, and they hired a hall where they can pray and get together and have a Bible study and start praying the Vesper and having Sunday school, having youth meeting. And bit later, they bought a church, already built church from, I think, Methodist church or something, I can't remember, but it was a Methodist church. They bought an old church, and we had to renovate it and to alter it to suit us, to be a Coptic church. So actually Father Minan Amatallah, he was our first Coptic priest. He was an amazing man, very spiritual, very dedicated, very ritual. He loves rituals, very strict, very kind, very generous. Everything in this man. He was amazing. For me, as a young person, he was my father, and I am indebted to him in making me, close to the church. He was very patient with me as a young chap, so I'm indebted to him for loving the church. So the church started very strong. Father Mina was a very good man, very dedicated.
So did other priests come after him?
You can say 3 years later, Abu Minan Amatallah asked His Holiness to send another priest for Melbourne. As you know, Sydney and Melbourne are the two biggest cities in Australia. It's about a 1 hour flight between the two of them. And we had the concentration of the people mainly in Sydney and then Melbourne. So Abu Minan Amatallah used to serve Melbourne too. Used to go Saturday here, travel every week. Saturday, pray the Mass there, then back to Sydney to pray Vesper a Saturday night, and then the Mass on Sunday in his church. Like that for about 2 or 3 years, until he asked His Holiness to send him another priest. And he did ordain a new priest. He was Abuna Victor Uchnoch, a great man too. And he passed away also a few years ago. So both our pioneers, priests, passed away after they have put the plant and they watered the seed. Now you can see beautiful plants growing and flourishing.
When did you want to serve in the church, and how did you serve your church?
Again, I'm indebted to Father Minan Amatallah. I remember 1972, we were going to have our first visit by a bishop, and the first bishop ever come to Australia was late Bishop Samuel. the bishop of the ecumenical services, the one who passed away at the time of Sadat. Bishop Samuel was the first bishop to come to Australia, 1972. I remember this story very well. Abu Naiman and Amatallah start to announce at the church that, hey, parents, there's a good chance coming up. Why don't you encourage your sons to become deacons? There's a bishop coming up, and we don't know when else it's going to come again. So it's a good chance. So it's good if you can bring the names of your sons so they can be ordained as bishops. Lots of parents, you know, brought their names, the names of their sons. But anyhow, Sayyidina came on Sunday morning, and Abu Namina Ma'atallah was going around the church giving incense, and I was there standing next to my dad. So at that time I was about, what, 17, 18, something like that. So Abuna noticed that I'm standing next to my dad. He called me and said, why are you standing here next to your dad? I said, I'm praying. What's wrong? He said, no, come on, go in the other line. I said, what line? He said, no, you go join the line so you can become a deacon. I said, no way. I don't want to become a deacon. Abuna,
so he pushed you in every sense of it.
in an amazing way. He was so persistent, and he never let me go. So I thought of if I can play a little trick so I can let Abuna pass away, and go away, and leave me alone. I said to Abuna, listen, if my dad agrees to be ordained with me, I don't mind. So Abuna left me and started to convince my dad. So my dad got shocked again, and he didn't want to do that in the first place. So Abuna could convince my dad. And then my dad said, okay. Then I couldn't believe it. Then my dad said, okay, come on, let's go.
Perfect.
So my dad grabbed me up, and we went to the line so we can become a deacon. So I can't forget that, the persistence of Abu Namina for me to become a deacon. That was a blessing for me. And I didn't know, but he knew. So he encouraged me. So anyhow, I became a deacon, and he kept his word. Abu Namina said, now be ordained and I will teach you. And he kept his word, and he taught me many things. And lucky enough that Abu Namina had 3 sons. One of my age, the other one is older than me by 1 year, and there's another younger one by 1 year. So we're very close. So the 3 sons very close to me. And they helped me a lot. They taught me a lot. So we were very close. Well, we used to go to the same school too, and you go to the same church. So anyhow, that's helped me to come closer to the church, to serve as a deacon, to know more about the church, to learn and to study. Bit by bit, Abu Namina encouraged me to join the first ever discipleship course, a discipleship course, where they teach you, how to become a servant. I joined this group, and that was very helpful to me. There were a group of Sunday school or youth leaders that started to teach us about church history, church tradition, church rituals. So that also helped me a lot to know more. At Sunday school, I had to prepare lessons so I can present it to the kids. When I was preparing lessons about saints, church saints, this is where it really touched me. When I started to read and prepare lessons about St. Moses the Black, St. Anthony, and St. Arsenius, these 3 great saints really touched my heart. I used to go to Catholic churches too.
Which of the old fathers affected you the most at the monastery of St. Anthony?
It is a shortcut to heaven.